Adidas Running in 2025 is changing quite drastically. Now, we have all of the same models in play that we've had for many years now, but the emphasis on which ones to use for what are going to adapt and change quite a bit, I think, this year. Mostly because of the new direction that Adizero is heading with softer, more compressive foams, and what that requires for runners and how you adapt to running in that new direction of materials. Now, I made a video that's getting into some of this. I'll put a link in the description if you want to see that whole story. But in this video, I'm going to sit down and go through a bunch of ways of building a full Adidas rotation for 2025 using almost all Adizero shoes with one or two models outside of the Adizero range because I think they're quite relevant, and try to help you really get into how are you going to build and race in these Adidas running shoes. Now, a couple disclaimers. This video is being recorded at the beginning of February of 2025, which is very early in the year. We have had a bunch of Adizero releases so far in 2025, but there's a couple key ones that are not officially out yet. We also don't have any official information. I will be talking about them in this video because I think they're really important to talk about because they have implications about how you build a rotation. But if you are watching this video in the summer or late 2025 and it's still up, it means the assumptions that I'm talking about I was correct, which means I didn't need to take this video down and re-record it. But check for a pinned comment for any massive changes to this. I will pin that with any notes and links to other videos that get into more detail about specific things in this video. Because Adidas has decided to put multiple versions of Lightstrike Pro out there in the marketplace, we need to define what Lightstrike Pro actually is. This is how I look at Lightstrike Pro right now. There's really three formulas of it in market. There's what I'm going to call Lightstrike Pro Classic, which is the classic supercritical TPEE foam, firm, dense, with great energy return, high durability. That's what you see in the Adios Pro 3 and the Evo SL. That's the Lightstrike Pro that I think everyone knows and loves. Then there's what I'm just going to call Lightstrike Pro. That's the new 2025 formula that you find in the Adios Pro 4 and the Adios 9. That's very soft, very bouncy with a high energy return, and the durability is unknown, though it is trending that it's going to be okay, but not as good as Lightstrike Pro Classic. And lastly, there's Lightstrike Pro Evo, which luckily Adidas actually labels on the side of their shoe now, and that is the supercritical TPEE or PIBA or ATPU or really whatever Adidas wants. And that's what's found in the Evo 1 and now the Evo 2. That's a very airy, lightweight foam with extreme energy return. And it's a little bit more focused on absorbing impact than giving any real extreme bounce, though it is a very resilient foam. And durability for that is not a concern because that's performance first above everything else. So as I'm talking about Lightstrike Pro, these are going to be important to keep in mind. And the version of Lightstrike Pro in a specific shoe is also going to determine where it falls in what rotation. So it is quite important to actually understand these three foams. When looking at the Adidas running range for 2025, almost all of them are Adizero. Now Adizero is their performance range, so that makes sense. And I break them into these categories. We have daily, tempo, race, and hyper. Looking at the race shoes, which I think really are the most important shoes in this page, and this is really what every rotation is going to be built around, we have the Adios Pro 4, the Takumi Sen 11, and the Evo 2. These are going to be the main race shoes for 2025. However, the Evo 1 and the Adios Pro 3 are still going to be out there. People are still going to be running in those. And I think there's some valid rotations to build for those shoes. Moving to the daily trainer, there are two that I think are going to be very important for 2025. There's one which we've only heard mentioned, and I'm going to call that the Adizero Trainer. It's unclear if that's a completely new shoe or that's a SL3, an update to the SL2, but it's supposed to be absolutely spectacular, and I think that's going to be a very important shoe in this rotation. There's also the excellent Supernova Rise 2, which is not an Adizero shoe, but I think it's a really great training option for a lot of these rotations. We also will have the SL2 and the Supernova Prima also in conversation with this. Now, again, the Supernova series is not part of Adizero, but I think both of them are really good daily training options for a lot of these rotations. In the tempo category, we have the Boston 13, the Evo SL, and the Adios 9. I think some people would put the Takumi Sen 11 in there, but officially to Adidas, the Takumi Sen 11 is a race shoe. Now, the Boston 13 is a shoe that, as of the recording of this video, is not released, but we have seen all of the images of it, but there is a big question about which version of Lightstrike Pro foam that's in that, and I will talk about that in the rotations. The Evo SL is a shoe that's actually quite good, though very different from really everything else on this page. And there's the Adios 9, which is an excellent trainer for really any kind of running, mostly tempo running. And then on the hyper side, we have the Prime X3 Strung, which I'm not going to talk a lot about in this video. We don't know a lot about this shoe, but it is going to be the most Prime X of Prime X. And I think for some runners, this could be a very valid shoe to have in a rotation and build around. Starting with the rotations, let's start with what I think is going to be the main rotation for Adizero or just Adidas Running in 2025. And I think when the team at Adidas Running really builds all the products, this is exactly how they're intending them to work. Now we have the same categories of daily, tempo, and race. And starting with the race, this will be the Adios Pro 4. Most of these rotations are going to end with the Adios Pro 4 as the race option. I think for 2025, that is by far the best option for the most runners. There's a couple edge cases where other options will be in there. I'll get to those. But for the main Adizero or Adidas Running racing rotation this year, the Adios Pro 4 is your race shoe. The daily shoe is going to be the upcoming Adizero Trainer. Again, we don't know much about that other than we're hearing it is supposed to be absolutely spectacular. And I think that's going to be the trainer, the daily trainer for a rotation. And then the tempo category, we're going to have the Boston 13. Now, we've seen everything about the Boston 13. We know there is Lightstrike foam as a carrier foam in that. And we know there's Lightstrike Pro in that shoe. The big question here, though, is we don't know what version of Lightstrike Pro that is. If it is Lightstrike Pro Classic, I don't think this shoe goes here. I think it'll be kind of irrelevant in this rotation. If it is Lightstrike Pro, the new Lightstrike Pro, then this will be the tempo trainer for the Adizero or Adidas Running main lineup in 2025. And if the Boston 13 actually gets Lightstrike Pro Classic and therefore isn't relevant in this rotation, I think the tempo trainer that will now go in here will be actually the Takumi Sen 11. Now the Takumi Sen 11 is officially a race shoe from Adidas. That means I think that it will get the actual new Lightstrike Pro, the same formula Lightstrike Pro that's in the Adios Pro 4. And if that's the case, this now becomes the tempo trainer. And this is important because the feel of running in the Adios Pro 4 is so much different than older Lightstrike Pro Classic shoes that you're going to want a tempo trainer that actually is encouraging getting used to that new foam. And I think the Takumi 711 is now going to be your best option in that case. However, both the Boston 13 and the Takumi 711 are in Lightstrike Pro Classic, the older Lightstrike Pro. I think this is probably going to be your main training and racing rotation for Adidas Running in 2025. The new Adizero trainer, which is supposed to, again, be spectacular and be a lot of the same technology that you find in the Adios Pro 4. Therefore, the Adios Pro 4 is a race shoe. And really, either one of these shoes could cover the tempo training needs. Though it sounds like what we're hearing about the Adizero trainer is that it will be spectacular and actually up-tempo enough to do a lot of those longer tempo runs that you need for a half or a full marathon build. Now, I think there will be a secondary 2025 Adizero or Adidas Running rotation, and I think it'll be based around this. The Evo 1 as your race shoe, therefore your tempo trainers could be the Evo SL because that shoe actually has a similar feel to the Evo 1, both in geometry and in feel. Even though the Evo SL is using Lightstrike Pro Classic and the Evo 1 is using Lightstrike Pro Evo, there is a similar feel, and I think the Evo SL makes a very valid trainer to the Evo 1. And then you're probably going to pair the Adizero trainer with this rotation. This is going to be, I think, a rotation that very few runners actually use. But if you love the Evo 1 and that is your race shoe, then I think the Evo SL is your tempo trainer and the Adizero trainer is going to be the best option to round that out. At the same time, I think those that are going to be racing the Evo 2, and I do expect the Evo 2 to be on sale at some point in 2025. I would expect it in fall of 2025, but it could really come out at any point. And I think it's going to have the same price and be the same limited availability as the Evo 1. But if you're lucky enough to get that shoe or your runner that's going for a PR, I think if you're going to be racing the Evo 2, this will now be your rotation. Your tempo trainer now becomes the Adidas Pro 4 because they share a very similar geometry and they should have a similar feel underfoot. And again, the Adizero trainer becomes your daily trainer to kind of round these all out and give both shoes a little bit more durability and range. And lastly, in this kind of alternative training and racing rotation for Adidas Running in 2025, I think you have this. It starts with the Adidas Pro 4 as your race shoe, but your tempo trainer is now going to be the Prime X3 Strung, and then your daily trainer is probably going to be the Supernova Prima or Prima 2 when that eventually releases. This is a runner who just wants a lot of cushion, a lot of stuff underfoot, and they just want to feel the bounce across every shoe in their rotation. This is going to be one that I think a lot of people who want that feel are going to love. Now, another rotation that I think a lot of people are probably thinking about right now in early 2025 and actually probably be building because all three of these shoes are available in market right now is this. The SL2 is your daily trainer, the Evo SL is your tempo trainer, and the Adios Pro 4 is your race shoe. Now, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this rotation because the Evo SL and the Adios Pro 4 have really nothing to do with one another. From a feel underfoot, a geometry standpoint, the way they run and the way they engage your foot, they really do not have any sort of parallel to one another. And I really do not think the Evo SL makes a good tempo trainer to the Adios Pro 4. It just runs completely different. I think the SL2 to the Adidas Pro 4 actually works quite well, though again, the SL2 is going to be updated at some point in 2025, so this may not be relevant. I think a better way of looking at this rotation is for a runner who wants to do this. You want to hang on to Lightstrike Pro Classic a little longer. Therefore, the Evo SL to the Adios Pro 3 makes a ton of sense because there's a lot of connection there as far as how both those shoes feel underfoot. And even though the Evo SL has a very different geometry than the Adios Pro 3, the way it engages your foot, the way the foam works, the way it feels underfoot, I think the Evo SL makes an excellent trainer for those who want to still race in the Adios Pro 3 in 2025. And the SL2 I think is just a great all-around trainer option to round out those two shoes. Now, another rotation that I think may be relevant, especially if the Boston 13 releases with Lightstrike Pro Classic foam, will be this. Swapping out the Adios Pro 3 for the Boston 13. You're going to get the newer shoe, the newer geometry, and now the Evo SL and the Boston 13 overlap and complement each other very well. And I think both shoes are really great race options for anyone. But this type of rotation is going to give you a lot of options to do more casual racing between using the Evo SL for some shorter races and maybe the Boston 13 for longer races or a race where you feel you're going to benefit from the rods in the midsole. But this is going to give you a lot of great options for really any type of racing. And again, if the Boston 13 releases with Lightstrike Pro Classic, I think this will satisfy a lot of runners and it's going to work really well together. But another way of mixing this would be this. You don't need the SL2. You could just use the Evo SL as sort of your daily tempo and the Boston 13 as a tempo race shoe. Both these shoes really will work excellently well together, and I think they will complement each other quite well. I personally think the Evo SL is probably going to be a better Boston 13, but again, if the Boston 13 has Lightstrike Pro Classic, this is going to be a way of having a great tempo trainer in the Evo SL and a great tempo trainer in the Boston 13, but the Boston 13 will have the rods, so you have both options here. I think some runners will actually quite like this one too. And another rotation that I think is going to be really relevant for some runners is this. You're going to go all in on the Evo SL. I think the Evo SL is just as competent of a race shoe as the Adios Pro 4 for some runners. If you want the newer geometry that's in the Evo SL, but you still love Lightstrike Pro Classic foam, I think this is probably going to be your best option. Pair the Evo SL with the SL2, and I think you're good to go. You really don't need anything else. And for the first time in a long time, I think this is a very valid training and racing rotation that has no plate in it. And I think you're not at any sort of disadvantage with this rotation at all in 2025. However, there's another way of doing this, and it's this. Just go all in on the Evo SL. Get really two pairs of Evo SLs. Use one as a daily tempo shoe, run that one into the ground a little bit more, soften it out, flatten out the rocker a little bit, make it a little bit more neutral for more daily running, and keep one that's fresher for important tempo and racing. And I think you're going to be good to go with this as well. I think, again, the Evo SL is a very competent shoe for really anything, any category, any type of racing for really many runners. Another rotation that I think is going to be very relevant in 2025, and this is frankly the one I'm probably going to be spending most of my time in when I'm in Adidas running shoes, is this. The Adios Pro 4 is my race option, the Supernova Rise 2 is my daily trainer, and the Adios 9 is my tempo trainer. Now, this is the rotation that's going to build the foot strength so that you can get the most out of the Adios Pro 4 and really activate the foam and the rods in that shoe. And as I've talked about in other videos, I think the Adios 9 and the Adios Pro 4 are really designed to work together. They really feel like they're meant to be a training pair so that you get all of the foot strength out of the Adios 9 and you learn how to activate that foam so that when you're in the Adios Pro 4 with that extra foam and the rods, you can really get the most out of that shoe. I think this is going to be an exceptional rotation. And as I said, I think this is the one I'll probably spend the most time in 2025. That is until the Adizero trainer comes out, and I think I'll swap the Supernova Rise 2 for that shoe. And this will be the one that I'll pretty much only be running in when I'm running in Adidas running shoes. Because again, I think all three of these shoes will be spectacular and built to work together to build foot strength, to build the mechanics, to get the most out of the Adios Pro 4. And lastly, I think there'll be this rotation that some runners will be looking to build. Those who like a lower stack shoe or maybe are focusing on shorter distances. And therefore their race shoe will probably be the Takumi Sen 11. And in this rotation, I don't think it matters what foam actually is in that shoe. It's better if it's the new Lightstrike Pro formula, but if it's Lightstrike Pro Classic, I think that will work in that race slot. Your daily trainer will be, again, the unknown Adizero trainer, and your tempo trainer will be the Adios 9. Now, this gives you a lot of options for training and racing because you could race in either the Adios 9 or the Takumi Sen 11. You're going to have a plated or rodded and non-rodded option. This is going to work on road and track. And if you're racing on the track and you're running in spikes, your race shoe could swap out for a spike. And I think this is going to be a great trainer and racing rotation for really shorter distances or runners who like to feel the ground much more. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you find this content useful, consider subscribing. You'll see more content from me pop up in your feed. If not, drop a like on this video because it helps this channel continue to grow, which I always appreciate. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.